Welcome to this presentation on considering the word harm in restorative practices. Today, I'm wanting to explore how reframing the language we use in restorative practices can create deeper opportunities for care, connection, and accountability. Restorative practices aim to repair relationships and foster healing, and the language we use plays a vital role in how we engage with others. This presentation is designed for those of you who are just learning about restorative practices and the restorative questions. My goal is to invite you to think critically about the words we use, their impact, and how we can intentionally shape our language to better support the communities that we lead. Let's begin by considering why the language matters. The words we choose shape the way people perceive a situation, understand their role in it, and they shape how they feel about the process. Restorative practices are all about creating spaces where people can heal, where they can take responsibility, and where they can rebuild relationships. To do that, we must be mindful of how our language either invites openness or creates barriers. In this session, we'll focus on the word harm and how it's used in the restorative questions. We'll explore why this word, while useful in many contexts, can sometimes limit the process, and we'll just consider how shifting the focus to care and connection might open new possibilities for transformation. Restorative questions are a core tool in restorative practice. Traditionally, they're divided into two sets, one for the person harmed and one for the person responsible for the harm. So you can see the questions here. What happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? And how has this affected you and others? What has been the hardest thing for you? Those are the questions for the person harmed. For the person responsible for the harm, the questions are what happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what you have done and in what way? What do you think you need to do to make things right? These questions are incredibly powerful, but as we'll see, the framing of the language around them can impact how participants engage with the process. So, why reflect on this language? The word harm is central to the traditional framing of these questions, but it does carry certain implications. For many people, harm suggests blame. And with blame often comes defensiveness. Imagine you're asked to reflect on harm that you caused. How might you feel? Defensiveness can create a barrier to authentic engagement and accountability. Additionally, harm is not always straightforward. Sometimes a person's actions may have not been inherently harmful or intentionally hurt, yet another person may still experience pain or unmet needs or suffering. And we do want to give them care. By focusing solely on harm, we risk oversimplifying complex dynamics and losing sight of what truly matters, the opportunity to repair and, if desired, to reconnect. Reframing the language of the restorative questions allows us to shift the focus from blame to care and connection. When we talk about unmet needs or how a person didn't receive the care they wanted or needed, it creates a more supportive and compassionate environment. This doesn't excuse or diminish accountability, it simply opens the door to deeper understanding and engagement. By framing the questions around care and connection, we create space for participants to reflect honestly without the fear of judgment or blame. Some may wonder whether shifting the focus away from harm lets people off the hook. But that's not what we're talking about. The truth is this reframing can actually increase accountability, especially in complex situations and when harm was unintentional. When we move away from blame and we focus on the impact of the actions, we invite people to take a deeper level of responsibility. Accountability becomes less about punishment and more about acknowledging the effect of one's actions and taking the actions needed to repair the damage. This approach also increases the likelihood that the person affected will receive the care and understanding that they need to heal and move forward. Accountability is not lost in this process. In fact, I believe it's strengthened. To make the restorative questions more inclusive and acceptable, we can use flexible language that aligns with the needs of the people and the situation. For the first set of questions, we could label them as for those harmed, or for those affected, or for those who didn't receive the care they wanted or needed. For the second set of questions, we could say, for those whose actions didn't offer the care needed, for those seeking to understand their role, for those reflecting on the impact of their actions. The goal is to use language that invites openness and aligns with the restorative principles of care, connection, and accountability. Blame can keep us stuck in cycles of judgment and defensiveness, even in situations where harm does seem clear cut, such as an act of violence. The roots of that harm often extend far beyond the immediate event. By shifting our focus from blame to care, we break these cycles and center our attention on what can be done here and now. This approach empowers participants to address unmet needs, to repair relationships, and to move forward with greater understanding and possibility. So here's how the restorative questions could look with reframed language. For those affected, what happened? What were you thinking and feeling at the time? How has this affected you? What do you need to do to move forward? For those whose actions affected others, what happened? What were you thinking and feeling at the time? How do you think your actions affected others? What do you need to do to make things right? Or what do you need to do to repair what happened? Notice how these questions maintain accountability while fostering care and connection. Before we close, here are some questions for you to reflect on. How does the word harm shape your perspective on conflict or repair? How might reframing the language of restorative questions foster care and accountability in your community? What steps can you take as a leader to ensure your language creates spaces of respect and connection? Take some time to think about these questions and how you might incorporate this approach into your work. Go ahead and pause the video so you can reflect on the questions right now. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of language and restorative practices. As you continue learning, I encourage you to reflect on the power of your words and how they can shape the healing spaces you create. Together, we can use these practices to foster greater care, connection, and transformation in our communities. Thank you so much. I love talking about this stuff. If you want to go deeper, reach out to me and let's talk.